La, 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 la. Let's start that there. Start that again. Welcome back to another episode of Coffee Break Convos. I have today with me Marcus Baker. He is a writer-director based out of Seattle. He's previously directed the short films Counterweight, 100, and Three Women and a Possible Fire Next Door. Having loved film from a very early age, Marcus's creative vision and relentless ambition has converged seamlessly into his work. It's characterized by engaging narratives in his films and flawed characters and complex themes that you will see throughout his films. Marcus is also the founder and creative director of the Seattle Film Society, which is a filmmaker-run project dedicated to organizing, cultivating, and celebrating the greater Seattle filmmaking community. Marcus's most recent film, Three Women and a Possible Fire Next Door, has finished its festival circuit and is available to watch on his YouTube channel at Marcus Baker Film. So, welcome, Marcus, to my show. I'm so excited to have you here. First of all, I want to ask you off the bat is you've loved film from a very early age. So can you share the moment or experience that really first inspired you to pursue writing, directing, and producing?
Yeah, and also, I mean, thank you so much for having me. I'm so happy to be here. We should say, for the purposes of my own intro here, that you starred in Three Women and a Possible Fire Next Door, and you are fantastic in it.
Thank you.
So yeah, of course,
I
yeah,
didn't want to
and
boast myself, so
no. I mean, I'll boast for you. Like you're phenomenal at it. So thank you so much, and thank you so much for having me. Yeah, I mean, as far as the the kind of moment that I really came to love film, I think a lot of it really came out of when I was 15. I saw The Dark Knight, and that's kind of always the moment that I cite as like the pivotal moment in my career. I remember seeing that and really being like blown away by it and not really understanding why, but it was a real activation point for me in terms of just starting to understand what a film could do, what the types of themes you could explore, the types of ideas you could explore, the types of characters you could have on screen, all those sorts of things. And I imagine that's true for, so many filmmakers of my generation. I've really always been a writer. That's quite honestly how I really think of just about everything I do as a filmmaker. I think of it all. I think of everything I do as an extension of my writing. I think like everything's really grown out of kind of those two things where I was always writing growing up. I was writing little short stories, I was writing scripts and all this kind of stuff. And then eventually I started really getting into movies in high school after I'd seen The Dark Knight. I didn't really go to film school or anything like that, but I went and I got my associates, and I went and started working in the film industry. I was like freelancing pretty much not right out of high school, probably right around the time I was 20, I started freelancing. And I liked freelancing on sets and that sort of thing. It's really hard. It can, you can be working for weeks at a time, 12-hour days, and it really just eats your life. And as someone with a writing background, I found it really hard to just have time for writing when I was doing that. And so when I decided to leave freelancing and really pursue filmmaking, that grew out of the desire to have time to write, to focus on the thing that I have always loved the most, which obviously is the writing. And so I left freelancing and was decided, I'm going to get a day job, and I'm just going to write and make little projects, and I'll see if I still want to write and direct movies. And pretty much as soon as I started doing that, just making little shorts with my friends on the weekends, I realized, oh, this is everything I want to be doing. Of course, like, I don't care if I don't care what I'm doing. Like, I don't care what kind of job I have to do this. I just want to be able to do it.
Oh, that's great. I mean, you started out with writing, and I mean, some people they tend to just stick with one thing, but for many, it's one thing leads to another, and I'm assuming writing is what led to you wanting to direct.
Yes, yeah. And again, I think I really do see everything as an extension of writing. Directing, even for me, I see as a way to protect my own writing because when I'm writing a script, I have a very specific vision for it in my mind. I didn't want to write a script and then hand that over to someone. I also feel that a lot of my projects are very personal. I find that everything that I make is very personal in some way or another, and it's really hard to, have a project that you care about that you are so close to, and then, hand that over to someone else to make. Some people can do it, but I am not one of those people. So
I do want to bring one thing to a point because I have worked with you personally and I have read two of your scripts. I just want to say that anybody who's thinking about, possibly going to film school or not going to film school, debating whether or not it's worth it, I mean, that is like to each their own. But you just mentioned that you didn't end up going to film school, but your writing is so fantastic. It's so amazing. And the way you direct on set, the way you're prepped for everything, the way you rehearse, it's as if you went to film school for 10 years and then you've been working, you've been doing this for 10 years. That's literally what it felt like. And with your writing, it just seems like you have so much training behind you, but really you are, I guess, rudimentary training is would that be the right word of teaching,
yeah.
learning by doing and learning by
Yeah.
watching. Yeah.
Yeah, and yeah, definitely. Yeah, I think my real background wasn't ever in film production, really. And when you're freelancing or when you're starting out, really, so many people are getting into directing because they started in camera and they wanted to direct, or they started in production and they wanted to direct. I came to film really through reading film criticism. When I was in high school after I saw The Dark Knight, I didn't have like where I grew up, like there wasn't really film programs. There certainly weren't like any real filmmakers where I lived. And having the background that I had in writing, it became this sort of like weird connection of like I really came to film through like wanting to just understand how it worked because I'd had a really strong response to seeing The Dark Knight emotionally, and I wanted to know why it had made me feel that way, and I couldn't find anything that would explain to me basically what cinematic language is, for the lack of a better term. And eventually I was able to find writing on it, and that writing was film criticism, and I was kind of off to the races from there, where I just started to become a pretty voracious reader of film criticism. I read just about everything I could get my hands on. I became a fan of, several different like film criticism websites and critics in specific whose work I was like always reading. And I would say that's been the biggest influence on my writing by far is that like I think for a long time I tried to approach things from a very thematic point of view. And that's kind of an outside in way to work as a writer. And I think it's only really been recently, I think from 100 onward, that I really started to think of my writing as more, think of it more organically as like starting with a situation, kind of building that out. Yeah, that's kind of a long-winded answer on that.
Paints a really great picture for anyone who wants to be a writer director is that there's multiple ways to go about it and there's many
Yeah,
different ways to teach yourself.
absolutely.
And you don't have
Yeah.
to spend thousands and thousands of thousands of money to like, teach yourself.
Yes. Yeah, and I mean, I had so many friends growing up that like wanted to go to film school or wanted to do X, Y, and Z. I mean, film school is just so expensive to go to. Even if you get in, it's not like, not everyone walks out and is Steven Spielberg. Like it is really going to film school is an enormous gamble if you don't already have like a background in some trade in film. And I just didn't want to take that risk on. And I also knew that like that wasn't really for me. I think in so many ways, like the filmmaker I am today really grew out of not having like a formal education in how to make films. certainly, as you mentioned, and I think it's kind of a great distinction. I've picked things up over time. A lot of things I've just like cobbled together from like being on the internet, and being like in reading internet film criticism, like watching things on YouTube and things like that. And a lot of it's also just experience. And I think a big part of that for me is it's allowed me to kind of develop organically, not only as a filmmaker, but to develop my understanding of myself as a filmmaker and
Mhm.
what is interesting to me, why it's interesting to me, which I think at the end of the day is the single most important thing to know about yourself as a filmmaker or an artist in general is why you are making the art you're making. What is important to you in making the art you're making? I think because I didn't go to film school, I've had to focus on that more than the technical elements, and I personally see that as kind of is much more of a benefit, I think.
Absolutely. I mean, I'm a good example of like I went to film school. I'm not Spielberg. But I mean, the best thing that came
Yeah,
out of film school was the friendships and the memories that I made.
absolutely.
So, I mean, talking about your short films, all of them counterweight 100 and Three Women, which I was a part of. That one's a situational comedy. 100
Yeah.
is heavy drama. They all explore different and complex themes, which you were mentioning about, touching upon different themes. How did you develop your voice as a filmmaker? I mean, you did talk about this, how it was forming as you were learning and what was important to you. How did these complex characters and stories come about? I'm very interested to know, especially after reading even just like the couple of pages from 100. I mean, that's a very complex relationship between a mother and a daughter. Where is this voice coming from?
Yeah, I mean, I think as I mentioned, a lot of it is just kind of doing it. That's a big part of it. Something I thought at the beginning of my career is that, I was going to have a grand plan and I was going to do this and this would become this and that would become this and A plus B would equal C and all this kind of stuff. And it's never that way. And I think that's something I've really had to unlearn in the early part of my career. So I think at some point you kind of just have to focus on doing things the way that you want them done, because that's really how you kind of start to shed your influences and find your own voice, I think. As far as how I kind of like land on themes for certain stories and those sorts of things, I think a lot of it for me really is just like it's always asking myself the question of what is it that I'm interested in this story and what is it that I'm wanting to explore thematically, what is interesting to me about the characters. With 100 in particular, I was really interested in that central mother-daughter relationship. The film is about a mother. It's a short film. It's about a mother asking her daughter for money. The daughter is hoping to move out, and the mother is like in dire financial straits. When I was writing that film, it really grew out of the initial idea of like having been a broke filmmaker for so many years and the way that, $100 can be both no money at all and like just a life-changing amount of money. And I wanted to kind of explore how that would play in a situation where like money is really tight. In the story, I mean, the mother's like, she's having a hard time at work, her hours are getting cut, and the daughter's also trying to move out, and it's just, it's not. I was really interested in these two characters who are both right in their own ways, even if they have different approaches to that kind of information, if you will. Yeah, and I think like it really just grows out of like looking at the script, looking at the story, looking at the characters, and always ask myself, what is it that I'm interested in, and what does this story need to support what I'm interested in? What is going to help these characters, or what is going to tell this story in the best way possible. And again, to me, that's a form of writing. I mean, that extends out into how we shoot the film, how the film's lit, how we score the film or don't score the film, because 100 has no music in it. And it's, it's a lot of different things that go into developing your voice as a filmmaker. And I think all of them really come back to asking yourself over and over again, what is it that I care about in this story?
I like what you said of $100 could be nothing or it could be everything. And for every person, that perspective is justified because of
Yeah.
whatever they dealt with in their life,
Yeah.
which is very apparent in your characters, where everything that they say and do is justified for that particular character, even if it doesn't make sense to anybody else,
Yeah.
which is what
Yeah.
makes the characters so appealing and so 3D and real and
Yeah.
flawed.
Thank you. Yeah, and
Yeah.
I think like that was one of the things that when we did Three Women together, I mean that was one of the things that I really strove for in that. I've always thought of that film as a screwball comedy. And a lot of screwball comedies are romance pictures. They're films that are, it's a man and a woman and they're like at each other's throats and it's zany and funny and but at the end they fall in love. And I've always found that really boring. I always really enjoy the screwball comedies where like one character walks into someone else's life and just like blows it up. And that's what I really wanted out of Three Women because it is like fundamentally it's about a character who has anxiety about a possible fire next door, and that anxiety like takes over everything else. And again, that was just me looking at the story and being like, well, what am I interested in
Mhm.
in this story? What do I find appealing? What's funny to me, et cetera, et cetera.
That was a very, very fun shoot day.
Yeah.
I mean, this is kind of related to the last question. What is something that really draws you to these flawed characters? And is there a process that you follow to bring the elements within these films to life, or is it case by case basis?
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely case by case. Every story is different, every character is different, and I think in terms of how I bring them to life, how I find things in those characters, it changes every time, and I think, it should change every time because every story is different. It needs different things. As far as what interests me in flawed characters, I think it's really simple to say, but I think flawed characters are just like more interesting to write. Writing characters who have a lot of contradictions and exploring kind of the end result of those contradictions is something that I really love doing. I think it just makes for a more fascinating thing to watch because I think something I'm always interested in as an artist and as a person is, what makes someone tick, what makes them do what they do, and especially if like, if you're watching someone, it's kind of a silly example, but if you're watching someone like murder someone, like my in a movie, like my question is always like, well, like what led them to do that, because
Mhm.
I find that character's motivation interesting. I find those sorts of things really interesting. And I think that's honestly the reason why I find flawed characters such fun to put into films and so fun to write. I mean, I also grew up, watching Breaking Bad and Mad Men and Sopranos and all those kinds of shows. And those shows are just all, bad men doing bad things and they feel bad about it, but do they? And it's like, it's that kind of thing. So
Those are great examples.
yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
So, as both a writer and director, I know you mentioned earlier that you went into directing to really protect your story. Those are also, two entirely different hats in a way. So, how do you balance both the creative vision and, I mean, the reality of making a production come to life? Like, budgeting, finances, gathering crew, cast, locations, permits,
Yeah.
marketing, distribution, film festivals, especially on indie projects, which are tend to be very low budget and passion projects.
Yeah, and I mean it's always tough. I mean, the finance element of it, especially at the DIY level, is always, very often you're just putting every dime on screen and you're doing as much as you possibly can to just like get the thing to exist, which is always really hard. I think the key to kind of making it work and to kind of balancing everything is to really embracing collaboration. I mean, the saying, you write the movie three times. I think realistically, you write it like five times. I mean, there's writing, there's pre-production, there's production, there's post, there's marketing, and all of those involve, collaborating with a lot of different people in a lot of different departments. And as a director, you're kind of at the core of it, and you're the engine for the thing. And so in a perfect world, people are coming to you and asking you questions and being like, how does this fit in the movie? Does this work? What do we think about this pillow? Does this shirt work for this scene? Like all these kinds of things. And yes, I am the person at the core saying yes, that, no, that, et cetera, et cetera. But it's still a form of collaboration. I mean, those people are bringing options to me. Those people are bringing their ideas and their creativity to the situation, to set, to try and make the thing real, because especially on a passion project, you're often working with your friends who just want to help you, who just want to like help get the thing made. It's not like a commercial where they're like, you're shooting a car commercial and you're like, I don't know, whatever. Like, people on a passion project, people are putting themselves into it. And so I think so much of the key to balancing that sort of thing really does come back to just not only collaborating, but being open to other people's ideas. There's a great Richard Donner quote, which I'm gonna like butcher right now, but it's make sure that like you're listening to everyone's ideas fundamentally. And that's something I always try and like prioritize on set, is that if someone brings me an idea, then I'm not going to just like shoot it down outright. I'm at least going to take it in and see if it fits the vision for the movie. The way that I really like to think of directing is that I build the sandbox and I know what falls within that sandbox, but like everyone's all playing in the sandbox together. Someone might build a sandcastle one way, another person might build a sandcastle another way. If it's in the sandbox, then it works. But like if it falls outside the sandbox, like I'll let you know. But like for the most part, like we're all working on this thing together, and I want people to feel like they can bring themselves to the project, that they can bring their creativity, their full selves, their vision. Also that they are trusting that I will tell them if like something is out of bounds, so to speak.
A great way to paint it in terms of collaboration. I've talked to a couple of writers that when they're writing a script, they're immediately thinking about how much the set or location or prop is going to cost, and then it starts affecting their writing. Do you think about that when you're writing your story, or I, or do you just like focus fully as a writer on the story? Just I'm just gonna write and then we can figure it out later. Like how do you, I guess, separate that producing side from when you're writing?
Yeah, I mean, it's I'd be lying if I said I hadn't gotten myself into trouble trying to like write a project and then after the fact like backtrack it or try and stuff it into a certain budgetary box. Because I've had two projects in the past where like, I really love them. I thought they would be amazing films. But when, push came to shove, like it was just going to cost too much. And when I tried to raise the money, we couldn't get it made. And so I think it's something I'm more conscious of now. I'm in the middle of trying to write, not trying to, I'm in the middle of writing what I intend to be my first feature. And so I'm very budget conscious right now, of what that's going to look like. And I'm certainly trying to, think about, okay, if we have this location, then we can shoot here and do all these other things with the money we save or whatever. I think something I'm kind of learning to embrace in myself as a filmmaker is the producing side. I think for a long time, I'd really set that aside. When I made my first couple of shorts, especially with Counterweight, I was trying to produce and direct and write at the same time. And that's really hard to do when you were like just starting out. And Counterweight was like the first real short film that I made. I made it when I was still living in LA in 2019. Um, and I came out of that experience knowing that I needed to find a producer. And so I had kind of set that kind of administrative side of myself on the back burner and been like, I don't need to think about producing. I'm not a producer, et cetera, et cetera. And I think it's really only been in the past year or two when I've started to really feel like, okay, I can produce. Producing is actually something I'm probably going to be pretty good at it as long as I, cut my teeth and, learn from the right people and all this kind of stuff. And a lot of that for me really has come out of the Seattle Film Society, and because every month we're producing events for them, and I have built that from the ground up with an incredible team of people that's involved me project managing and producing and sending emails and budgeting and yada yada yada. Um, and so I think in terms of how that applies to the actual like writing process of things, I think it's something I'm still integrating into kind of my own understanding of myself as a filmmaker, I would say. But I think it's something that I'm certainly more conscious of than I used to be.
Mhm.
And it's a skill that I think I've developed without sounding egotistical, probably more than I give myself credit for.
But I hopefully it hasn't hindered you in any way.
No, no,
Okay. Okay. Yeah.
yeah, yeah,
Because that's always the suckish part. If it
yeah.
stops you, then you're just like, oh man.
Yeah, and I think it's just a matter of doing it more. I'm in I'm in the middle of like producing a music video. I produced and directed a commercial like last month, and it's something I'm starting to do more of. It's just something that I don't have a ton of experience with yet, but it's a goal, I'd say.
Okay, so you did mention that you were in LA and
I was.
you are in Washington now, and
Yes.
that
Yeah.
is not usually the trajectory of
Yeah. Yeah.
people.
Hmm.
They start out regionally and then go
Hmm.
to like New York, LA, Atlanta.
Yeah.
So, can you explain how that decision came about of you moving out of LA? And it
Yeah.
sounds like you're actually thriving more here in a regional community.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's interesting. I certainly don't begrudge anyone who goes to LA. I lived in LA for 3 years. I think, if you want to touch the beast, so to speak, you should go and touch the beast because if you don't, you're always going to wonder, could I have made it in New York and LA? Could I have done these sorts of things? And that's equally important to know about yourself as a filmmaker. I think something that I learned living down there was that I didn't feel a huge need to be in Los Angeles. I still have friends down there, and it is like important to at minimum have connections down there. You have to have some kind of a network if you want to get bigger projects made down there. Just because so much of the actual like film business runs through Los Angeles and New York. But you can do it without being there. When I moved there, I really moved there because originally, as I said earlier, I mean, I grew up watching Breaking Bad and Mad Men and that sort of thing. And I went down there wanting to write for television. And I learned within a week of being there that I didn't actually want to write for television. And I kind of fell into working in post production and worked on like the Oscars and the Emmys and things like that. And like that stuff was cool, but like at the end of the day, I wasn't doing what I really wanted to be doing, which was writing and directing. And so I started doing that in 2019. I set out with the goal to make, a short film a month. And I very quickly ran out of money. But I made three short films, and by the time I'd finished with the third one, I was like, well, I don't need to do this anymore. I have bigger projects that I want to make. I should save more money and make those bigger projects, which is what I did. I made Counterweight in August 2019. We finished that in December. And then COVID hit in January and everything shut down. And I spent all of COVID watching movies. I watched more movies than I have ever watched in my life and probably will ever watch in my life. I think I watched like 400 movies in a year, which is crazy.
Oh
Um,
wow. That
yeah.
I I wonder if that's a record. Like
Uh,
we have to Google
not
that.
no, I mean I know you talk to film programmers and they watch that like every year. It's crazy.
Oh wow.
But that's their job. I mean, it's not my job. Um but yeah, so I watched a lot of movies during COVID and like one of the biggest things that happened during COVID for me, or one, I guess one of the things I really realized during COVID is that like, a lot of my favorite directors aren't from LA, or they didn't, or like, they might have, or yeah, they're not from LA. They didn't like grow up here. They weren't like, they didn't feel like they had to be in LA. It was possible to build a career and like come back to LA, come back to New York, but like you can live elsewhere. And as soon as I realized that, I was like, well, like I love Seattle. All of my friends are up in Seattle. Like, I miss my friends and family, especially right now, COVID, you're isolated from everyone. It was really hard. I'd been living with like my partner at the time and two of our roommates, and they all left. And so I was just living in this apartment alone. And I was really sad. And I was like, well, like, where do I want to be in my life? Where do I want to make movies? What sorts of things do I want to be doing with my career? And do they require me being in LA? And the answer for that, by and large, was no. Um, so I moved back to Seattle. And I felt and continue to feel really good about that decision. I would agree. I mean, I think like I wouldn't say I wasn't like thriving in LA. I think like there, it was certainly different. But I think the things that I've discovered about myself as a filmmaker, and as a person, and because I think like those two things are very interwoven, really. I think I wouldn't have learned those things about myself had I stayed in LA. I think I just would have. I think my life just would have gone an entirely different direction, quite honestly. And that's not a bad thing, that would have been one way to live my life. But I think that um, the type of filmmaker that I am now and the person that I am now, really, those things are very heavily influenced by being here in Seattle, where it's easier to maintain a work-life balance for one thing. As a filmmaker, I am very bad at it because I'm so
Mhm.
busy all the time, but it's easier to maintain a work-life balance. I think it's really important to stay grounded in your community, outside of like the industry, and places like LA and New York can be very industry heavy. And I think again, that works for some people. That didn't work for me. But I think at the end of the day, like I made the right choice in moving back because it's taught me so much about myself. It's taught me so much about my what I value in my career as a filmmaker, and the sort of direction that I really want to move in, I would say.
Yeah, that's going to be really encouraging for anybody who is in a regional market and,
Mhm.
is you know dreaming about moving into one of these big cities, but it's too expensive, or
Yeah.
they feel like that's the only way that they can make their projects. But you just proved that no, it's not the only way that you can make your projects. You can make it literally anywhere. You just need that grit and the motivation to just keep moving forward.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I think that's one of the reasons why I resonated with you when, because we had a conversation the first time we met, of how important it is to have a life outside of film, because that really feeds you as an artist and it feeds
Yeah.
into your work. And also, it's just important to be a three-dimensional human in the real world.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, again, you can do those sorts of things in LA, like you can do that in New York. Like, that's certainly not to say that you can't do those things. I think for me, it wasn't the sort of thing that I felt I needed in my career. Um, I think it just, I think, artists in general, like, you take a very circuitous route to learning who you are and how that influences your work. And I think, that was kind of what I did. Yeah. But I'd say to anyone that's kind of living in a regional market and kind of wondering whether or not, they should go to a bigger market or, whatever, like anything like that. Like I think certainly there's value to going to one of those places, but you don't need to, especially not in this day and age. I mean, A24 just made a movie with an 18-year-old that they found on YouTube. So, I mean, it's you can do anything online these days.
I did not hear about that. Wow. Okay, I'm gonna
Yeah.
look that up after this.
Yeah. Yeah, it won't make you feel old at all, I promise.
Oh God. Oh gosh, please don't remind me. Okay. All right. Okay, so you are the founder of the Seattle Film Society. What motivated you to create that society, and how has building that community really influenced your own filmmaking, or has it in any way?
Yeah, yeah, and I mean, just to kind of give everyone context here, the Seattle Film Society is a group that I founded with six other filmmakers, or excuse me, seven other filmmakers. And it's an organization, it's an arts organization dedicated to organizing, cultivating, and celebrating the greater Seattle filmmaking community. That is the spiel that I've gotten very good at giving over the past 2 years. It really grew out of it, for me at least. It grew out of wanting to do more to kind of build up and support the filmmaking community here. There's a lot of like doors into the community here. I'll say that there's some entry points. Like you can take an editing class at the Northwest Film Forum. You can go to like a screen discussion at SIF. You can do all these sorts of things. But it's really hard to find the filmmaking community here. And in addition to that, there's not necessarily a lot of resources for building a career here as a filmmaker. Um, I like to think of it as kind of a second step. It's easy to learn how to make a short film. It's easy to learn how to edit a video. But there's not like those opportunities to show the things you're working on to your friends, to have like ongoing discussions that are sharpening you as a screenwriter or as a director or as an actor or anything like that. And so a lot of the goal that we've kind of realized over time, quite honestly, is to really build that community up and to like bring people together to show that there is a community here that wants to support each other. More than once a year, because a lot of people in the film community here only see each other once or twice a year at like a film festival, or they might see each other on set or something. And like, if you're hanging out on set, you're not, you're fundamentally working. Or if you're at a festival, like your ship's passing in the night. But at our events, which we have a bunch of events now, we really prioritize like giving people a chance to get together, to see
Mhm.
each other, to chat, to catch up, to like meet potential collaborators, to meet other filmmakers, to meet other film lovers who like want to support their work. Because those things are really important. And having that community is so critical to everything you do as a filmmaker beyond just taking that first step of I want to take an editing class or whatever. And I think in a perfect world, I think we really would like to be trying to build more infrastructure, which I think we are in the process of doing. Trying to build more support systems so filmmakers can get their work financed, so that they're not reliant on grants or what have you. And I think those things are long-term goals for the organization. But in for the moment, I mean, like the biggest resource that you're going to have in your career, whether you're applying for grants, whether you're, no matter where you're at in your career, is going to be the community that you can go and be a part of. And with Seattle Film Society, I mean, those events are happening. We have at least one event a week. We have our film discussion group, which meets every week. We have our locals only event, which is like our biggest screening event. That happens on the last Thursday of every month at the Northwest Film Forum. Then we usually have some kind of an off screening. We have open screen, which is like, you bring your film on a thumb drive, anything under 10 minutes goes up. We have our In Focus, which is like a filmmaker showcase. We have Truth to Fiction, which is a monthly documentary screening that we host in partnership with the Northwest Film Forum and Seattle Documentary Association. We're doing lots of events at any point in time, and they're great ways to like come and get involved in the community. And that's always what we're trying to prioritize, is giving people the opportunity to get involved, to show that like there is a place for you to come and be, and that there's a community for you to be a part of.